On May the 7th, 1989, an object entered the skies over southern Africa. According to a set of documents that would circulate throughout the UFO community, 2 fighter jets engaged in the metallic disc. A directed energy weapon known as Thor 2 was fired, and the craft came down into the sands of the Kalahari Desert. 2 non-human occupants were allegedly captured alive. Some say this was one of the most significant recoveries of the modern UFO era. Others would say it was a hoax, a carefully woven story that borrowed the language of secrecy to mask something else. This is the story of Operation Black Horse and the search for what, if anything, really happened. Now we have to go back in time because this is the year 1989. South Africa is under apartheid rule and South Africa is very military centric. So during that time you had to do compulsory service in the military when you turned 18 if you were a man. And South Africa had been fighting a border war with Namibia. It was also involved in a number of other conflicts. And the Cold War still shaped much of the world's military planning. South Africa was an ally of the US, and this was no exception. Regional conflicts, secret alliances, as well as rapid weapons research sat alongside the vast emptiness of the Kalahari. It was the landscape that one story, equal parts military lore, UFO myth, and intelligence drama would take root. So late 1980s, South Africa did have active air bases, advanced pilots, as well as was interacting with foreign military tech. It's a setting that makes an extraordinary aerial event such as this plausible. Not possible, plausible. At least in the sense that the aircraft were in use and experiments were essentially happening. According to leaked documents, at exactly 13:52 GMT, an unidentified object was detected entering South African airspace. 2 Mirage jet fighters from a base identified in the files as Valhalla, very Viking I know, was scrambled. The object, described as a disc, polished, roughly 20 yards long, was engaged with a directed energy weapon code named Thor 2. In 1989, directed energy weapons were largely experimental. The idea that a laser or a high-power microwave could disrupt electronics was not science fiction, it was science experiment. But there are big questions about range, precision, and the claim that it could bring down an entire aircraft. The documents say that this engagement was a success. The object was destabilized and it descended rapidly, crashing into the soft sands of the Kalahari Desert, a terrain that the files say preserved much of the wreckage and perhaps saved the lives of 2 of the occupants within it. So the weapon that was used to shoot down these weapons was a Thor 2 laser cannon, also referred to as a maser weapon. A maser stands for microwave amplification by stimulated emission of radiation, and it emits a high-level energy microwave beam, not a physical missile. It was said that the squadron leader ordered to arm and fire the Thor 2. Upon firing, the pilot reported multiple blinding flashes from the object, and the UFO lost control, began to descend rapidly, and crashed into the semi-soft sand of the Kalahari Desert. And it is said that the sandy terrain likely prevented the total disintegration of the craft. When recovered, the craft was found largely intact, suggesting some sort of controlled deceleration or soft impact. And the crash site was secured and the craft transported to the South African Air Force Base. So Tony Dodd, the investigator, explains that the weapon likely worked by disrupting the craft's internal control systems. And Stanton Friedman, a physicist and ufologist, noticed that the speed of light impact explains why the UFO could not react defensively, unlike past incidents, for example, like the 1969 Cuban MiG encounter or the 1976 Uranian Phantom UFO chase. So the type of craft that was found was said to be unknown. It was suspected to be of extraterrestrial origin, and it had markings. And there was some sort of alphabet there that was later identified by code breakers, both in South Africa and in the US, allegedly. It had these markings, and none of them were identifiable. That had this strange insignia forged into metal This is something that we've seen in a lot of UFO sightings, and its length was 20 yards, its height was 9.6 yards, and its weight was 60,000 kilograms. The material was unknown, for flawless polished silver surface with no visible seams, propulsion system unknown, pending laboratory results, and landing gear hydraulic type fully deployed, suggesting malfunction. So there is a theory that the Thor 2 laser cannon that shot at it, that it basically disrupted what was happening with this alien aircraft, and because of that it fell to the ground, and it attempted to land by deploying its landing gear but was unable to, and thus crashed. And while under observation at the Air Force Base, a hatch allegedly opened, slightly appearing stuck. It was then forced open with hydraulic equipment, and two humanoid entities in tight-fitting grey suits emerged and were captured alive. The leaked medical summary describes these creatures unlike any known terrestrial life form. I'll put a link to the report below, and you can even go look at it yourself. They were described as oversized skulls, slanted pupilless eyes, 8 webbed ditches, and no external genitals. It is said that one entity lashed out when the medical staff attempted to draw blood, inflicting harsh wounds on the doctor's face. After that, examinations were halted. They allegedly refused food. And certain traits like bilateral symmetry, appendages, cranial expansion are broadly compatible with life, hypothetically, involved under many conditions. But the specific combination described here is evocative of a familiar image that we know of, and that is of the grey archetypes of UFO lore. Now, when the spacecraft was examined, hieroglyphic type writing that was found on the craft was allegedly identical to symbols seen in the 1964 Sirocco UFO case in New Mexico, and Tony Dodd claimed that US and allied cryptologists have deciphered an alien alphabet. They were now able to read, write, or interpret the writing found on the recovered UFOs. Significant technological or cultural information had allegedly been extracted from this decoding project. Investigators believe that a telex, a sort of old communication system through telephones from White Patterson, ordered the retrieval under the umbrella of the Project Moondusk, a real program designed to recover fallen objects. But the existence of such a telex in the form advertised by investigators has never been corroborated by official declassification. The files claim that on June the 23rd, 1989, 2 C-5 Galaxy aircraft transported the craft and the 2 living entities to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. When these beings were transferred, it was said that they were reportedly cooled down to reduce activity before transport. It seems as though the South African government had them for about a month before they were transferred, and a refrigeration type system was used to keep them inactive during the transfer. And both entities and the craft were transported to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, USA. Now, transporting heavy sensitive cargo internationally involves paperwork, logs, and flight clearances. That 2 heavy lifters could be used is plausible, but in the age of FOIA and archival records, such a movement would generally generate a paper trail, and I for one have not been able to find one. There was also talk of a photograph and photographic evidence. A photo of a charred alien body was leaked, possibly doctored or recycled from an earlier mummified body photo in UFO magazine in 1989. Now, the main source of this is a man by the name of Captain James van Groen. He was part of South African Air Force intelligence in the Special Investigation Department, and he initially anonymously, but later revealed who he was after being exposed by intelligence service, leaked all this information. The motivation behind it, well, he claimed that it was his duty to humanity, and he signed a sworn affidavit containing the details of Operations Black Horse, and after that he had to flee South Africa. He was prevented from entering Canada and is said to be living in Germany. We do not know east or west. So he stayed with this man by the name of Dr. Henry Azidel, I hope I'm saying that correctly, in Nottingham while traveling to London. And now there's some controversy there because this person allegedly accidentally exposed Van Groen's identity by contacting South African authorities. And it is important to note that Van Groen's identity, as well as the authenticity of portions of his document, have been disputed. When a leak depends primarily on one contested source, the entire structure of it does become fragile. Now, what we know about Tony Dodd and his team, including Graham Birdsall, is that they sought to independently verify these claims through multiple channels, through NORAD confirmation, North American Aerospace Defense Command. They allegedly used a backdoor inquiry method to contact them, and NORAD sources admitted to tracking down an unidentified object over Southern Africa on May the 7th, 1989, considered to be a major breakthrough by investigators. And Todd and other investigators sought collaboration. NORAD tracks many objects. If something anonymous appeared on their radar types, it would be logged. But radar data is messy, and many undefined tracks are largely unexplained. They also contacted the South African Air Force. They contacted the squadron leader who was engaged with the UFO. He confirmed only firing one shot from Thor 2 laser cannon, which matches the official story provided by the informant, Captain Van Groen. And then they went to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where investigators called the Office of Scientific Intelligence at Wright-Patterson. They spoke directly with a named civilian scientist reportedly present during the recovery. And then when confronted, the official gave a non-denial statement. I neither agree nor deny with what you say, but appeared visibly shaken. After investigators contacted these lead figures in NORAD, Wright-Patterson, and in SA, South African authorities realized a leak had occurred, and according to statements, all hell broke loose within South African intelligence circles. Internal investigations and security crackdowns began. A source inside South Africa told Tony Dodd that officials were looking under the carpets to identify the leak, and this implied that the original whistleblower, Captain Van Groen, or his network was under direct surveillance and pressure. Shortly after the Wright-Patterson inquiry, communications from South Africa abruptly ceased. The ceiling fell in and the investigating, meaning official obstruction and intimidation, began. Their South African informant in England, believed to be Captain James Van Groen, received an urgent call from a high-level intelligence officer in South Africa, ordering him to return to South Africa immediately and warning him that he was in serious trouble. This indicated that South African authorities had realized the extent of the information leak and had moved to suppress it. And Dodd's final statement suggests that 1989 was perhaps one of the most active and significant year for UFO phenomena in decades, one where science, secrecy, and the unknown collided. Now, Dodd noted an increased rise in UFO activity, specifically across Britain in 1989. The increase in sightings appeared to coincide with the Kalahari crash. Perhaps they were coming back to try and retrieve their mates, I'm not too sure. But discussion turned to crop circle formations in the UK. These patterns had been appearing in 1918, and by 1989 they were now front page news internationally. Crop circles were also being reported in the US, including Iowa, the Gulf Breeze, Florida, Long Island, New York, and North Carolina. Dodd implied that the timing and the global spread of these events could suggest a larger connected UFO phenomena, unfolding parallel with the Kalahari incident. Researchers and scientists conducted field vigils in 1989 in July, setting up monitoring equipment in areas of frequent crop circle activity. The team reported feeling as if something was playing with them. The phenomena appeared to be aware and responsive to observation. During one incident, they heard a strange high-pitched noise emanating from the center of a newly formed crop circle, describing it as sounding like a high-pitched electric lawnmower. The sound was recorded and sent for acoustic analysis. It did not match any known mechanical or natural source. Researcher George Wingfield, one of the leading crop circle experts at the time, took hundreds of photos documenting the formations. In several photos, unseen objects appeared that were not visible to the naked eye. We know that photo lenses have a bigger range of spectrum than sometimes our own eyes do, and these were described as dark static-like shapes resembling electrical discharges or energy distortions. These objects seemed to appear along the edges of crop circles, suggesting that they were actively manipulating or creating the patterns. Scientists and photographers alike concluded that some form of intelligent energy or non-human intelligence was behind this phenomenon, although not necessarily extraterrestrial. So we know according to some reports that UFOs like to appear near sites of nuclear activity. So from that maser weapon, that microwave amplification by stimulated emission radiation weapon emits intense microwave radiation, and the Thor 2 laser cannon was used to disable the Kalahari craft was likely a maser-based directed energy weapon. It was invented in 1953 by an American physicist, Charles Hart Towns, and he was a precursor to the laser. Now, the report references the Vela satellite detection, which happened in September the 22nd, 1979, of a double flash of southeast South Africa, characteristic of nuclear detonation. It's long suspected that that is where South Africa was testing their nuclear weapons, and this was speculated to involve joint South Africa and Israeli weapons testing. And this notes that UFO sightings in Israel, especially around this time, suggest a possible link between nuclear experimentation and UFO presence. 1989 marked a pivotal escalation in both UFO sightings and crop circle activity, particularly in the UK. Now, we must know that the alleged official documents from the Black Horse, supplied by investigator Tony Dodd, bear numerous spelling, grammar errors, and inconsistencies, many which consider unlikely if it is true to be top military reports. Multiple sources claim that the main whistleblower, Captain James van Groen, admitted to at least some of the documents were fake or partially fabricated. We also have to talk a little bit about the claims that a Thor 2 maser cannon used to shoot down the craft of a weight of 60,000 kilograms with dimensions of 50 yards. These specifics are extraordinary and lack credible engineering support. Some researchers point out that the craft allegedly landed almost intact despite being shot down at high speed. This defies typical crash physics. Now we have to talk a little bit about the year 1989. 1989 was a year, to some researchers, marked an uptick in sightings in crop circles in Britain, the Belgian wave, and a rash of reports worldwide. The Kalahari story was woven into this tapestry, suggesting a possible catalyst or part of a pattern where we're suddenly having all these sightings happening in 1989. Mass phenomena like UFO waves can be self-reinforcing, such as media attention, cultural narratives, and group dynamics all amplify reporting. A spectacular claim in one place can ripple across communities and trigger lookouts everywhere. For every line of alleged corroboration, skeptics have raised red flags, retyped documents with errors, inconsistent dates, recycled photos, and a lack of an official paper trail for global military transfer. The larger the claim, the heavier the burden of proof. If a national air force shoots down an unknown craft and transfers it internationally, there should be a trail. Procurement logs, flight plans, diplomatic notes. There is an absence of these. Some have suggested this might be an intelligence disinformation operation, deliberately planted stories to sow confusion or test responses. Van Groen himself allegedly reported that parts of the story may have been fabricated, a revelation that complicated believers and skeptics alike. We also know that Cynthia Hind, she was one of the MUFON, she was aligned with MUFON for Africa. She later said that she believed that this was a hoax. Even if parts of the Kalahari claim were true, a cooperative recovery between a national air force and the US, live non-human beings and advanced craft, the implications would be staggering. Scientific paradigms, defense posture, and public transparency would all be challenged. The technology described, a craft with unknown propulsion and resilient materials, would represent an intelligence leap, but extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. Institutionally, governments often prioritize national security. If an anomaly appears on military radars, it will rarely enter the public domain without a policy decision to release it. At its core, the Kalahari story is human. People trying to answer questions to an anomalous event or tell a story that makes sense of a strange world. It is a tale of courage, of possible deception, and of the appetite for connection to the unknown, to one another. Belief in UFO often ties to deeper questions: trust in institutions, fears about secrecy, and longing for transcendence. Whether the story is factual or fabricated, it fills a cultural need. Operation Black Horse sits at the intersection of myth and modern state secret. We found partial confirmations and many contradictions. We found people who believed and people who doubted. We found documents, many red flags, and a desert, patient, indifferent, and unfinished. Whether you view the Kalahari incident as a cover-up or hoax or an unresolved mystery, it remains a story that asks us to examine how we value evidence, how we police secrecy, and how we face the unknown. The desert keeps its verdict for now, but the questions it raises are forever human.